Hey y'all, I'm Ed Southern. I'm the executive director of the North Carolina Writers Network and the editor of the upcoming anthology The Devil's Done Come Back, New Ghost Tales from North Carolina. It's my pleasure to be part of 10 for 10 today. I want to thank Kelly Shin for putting all this together and keeping it going in support of Helene relief. And I want to thank her for inviting me to join with you and share a little bit today. I'm asking you to donate to the Farm Cafe in Boone. Farm Cafe does wonderful work feeding their neighbors all the time, but especially they stepped up in the aftermath of the hurricane. I hope you'll check out their website, give them whatever you can. Again, it's the Farm Cafe in Boone. What I'm going to read for you today is the first section of the framing story for The Devil's Done Come Back. It's called The House of Vine and Shadow. Nate Batts half expected the door to crumble when he knocked. Shoot, he half expected the whole ramshackle house to collapse. So derelict it looked, so forlorn did it sag. Through his boots he could feel the porch boards give like sponges, and his nerves began to jangle against the excellent chance they'd crack and cave underneath him. God only knew what muck, what creatures he'd be among then. He could tell this once had been a trim little farmhouse, and before that a sturdy dog-trot cabin, somebody's pride and joy. Whoever had built or pieced it together had to have done so with skill, care, and self-respect, or else it wouldn't still stand at all. No, this house's only fault was long neglect. Vines had overtaken both front corners, not kudzu, but honeysuckle, wild cherry, and strawberry runners, and what looked to be some kind of grapevine, maybe scuppernong. Nate decided that yes, it had to be scuppernong, because he wanted it to be. Rot webbed the window casings, and up the porch columns ran cracks as thick as the vines. The whole house listed to the west, where erosion had steepened the yard's natural slope, and, of course, the porch and door seemed ready to crumble if Nate breathed too hard. But aside from all that, the first crew they'd sent to survey had assumed this house was abandoned. Nate's boss's guy in the county office had shocked him by saying that according to the last census, an old couple still lived there. Unless they've died since and no one's discovered them yet, the county man had added. Nate hated this part of his job. Not the prospect of finding two corpses, though that pleased him none, but the prospect of finding two living people living here. He hated being the port man for developers he'd never met and never would, money men set to make more money by turning more of the North Carolina countryside into one more high-end subdivision full of luxury homes that looked like they were made of cottage cheese, like they were imitation castles in a cheap amusement park. Houses overstuffed with overlarge rooms and garages, bristling with too many peaks and gables. Whatever shape it now was in, this house here had been prettier than what his bosses would build, more fit for a home once upon a time. He looked back at the highway the road crews already were widening, the country road becoming a commuter trail, feeding the growing city that once, not that long ago, had been far away. He assumed that whoever lived or had lived here once had grown tobacco in the skinny fields surrounding the house, between Highway 234 and the tree line of pine. He still could see the rolling swells of the furrows. Soon they'd come to level those rolls of red earth, to clear those pines, to culvert the branch that ran in their shade. He hated that. Hated his part in its happening. Hated that this was the job he'd fallen into once he'd set out to join the building trade. Nate had wanted him to follow in the footsteps of his grandfather, who'd come home from World War II and framed houses. That work had seemed to Nate something to take pride in, and he'd wanted to do work that was like it. He'd thought that this job would be such. He'd thought wrong. This was his job, though, and his bosses paid him well to do it. So Nate turned back to the front door, fist raised to knock again. Nate Batts about jumped out of his skin. The door stood wide open, and the old man staring at Nate from its maw looked like a living skeleton, except for his one eye cloudy and his one eye a deep and earthy brown. "We've been waiting on you an age," the old man said. Nate's jaw dropped, and a sound fell out somewhere between a mumble, a gasp, and a gulp. All he could see behind the man was shadow. "Well, don't just stand there letting the flies in now that you're finally here," the old man said as he turned away. He shuffled a step or two into the dark of the house, and then nodded, not quite looking back. "Oh, right," he said. "Won't you come in?" Nate would have been more alarmed but less confused if the old man had called him by his Christian name. As it was, he couldn't quite rule out that the old man did know him, and wasn't just senile or blind or both. If the old coot had called him Nate, he'd have had better reason for the sense, deep down, and not yet nagging, that he was being lured to some kind of doom. He tried not to follow. Sir, I'm from the Gold Leaf Company, and I... He stood with his toes on the transom, leaning from side to side as if he could better his view. Sir? Nate stepped inside, talking fast so that he wouldn't have to face silence as well as the shadows. "Sir, I'm with the Gold Leaf Company. My name is Nate Batts, and are you the owner of this property? Because if so, we'd like to make you an offer on this property, an offer we have faith you'll find." Nate had stepped into what he could only call a parlor, lit by an oil lamp and wallpapered with yellowed newsprint. Along the far wall, beneath a picture window curtained on the outside by honeysuckle vines, was a high-backed, high-armed sofa, and on the sofa sat the old man, next to an old woman, both of them smiling and expectant. The old man had that one eye a deep brown, but the old woman had two of the brightest blue eyes Nate had ever seen. Those blue eyes fairly sparkled as she said, "We are so glad to finally have you here." Oh, won't you take a seat, please?" She gestured at the wall she faced, the wall behind Nate, and the wing-back chair waiting against it. No, The woman kept smiling, but different somehow, and Nate could have sworn she said something, but he couldn't make out a single word. "Thank you," he said, as he settled into the cushion. Nate was about to say more, but he never would have believed the woman could rise and leave the room with such speed. He looked after her into the shadows for a dangling moment. "She's been like to have a fit waiting on you to get here," the old man said. Then the woman was at his side, reaching down a mason jar of brown liquid into his hand. "How about some tea?" she said. The ice inside clinked like a ring of jangling keys. Some part of Nate's mind was able to think, well, of course it does, seeing how bad her hand trembles. He snatched for the glass before she dropped it and spilled the tea all over him. Only then was some part of his mind, maybe the same part, able to think, but I never heard it clink at all until it was there, until she was there beside me. I never heard her footstep or a floorboard creak, neither. The tea was delicious, though, so sweet he'd have sworn he could feel his teeth start to come loose from his gums. "Thank you, ma'am. As I was saying, I'm Nate Batts from the Gold Leaf Company, and we're going to be putting in a new development right here along this stretch of the highway. Now, we've purchased every other lot in this tract. I'm happy to show you the property map if you'd like, and we're prepared to make a more than fair offer on yours. Now..." "Oh, that sounds lovely," the old woman said. "Yes, sir," the old man said. "A fair price is all I ever asked for, and it's hard enough to find. Can't turn down a deal if it's more than fair." This was not how this usually went. "Oh," the old woman said, "but we might ought to tell him first, though." "Likely so," the old man said. "He looks stout-hearted enough." "Yes, we ought to tell him. He ought to know beforehand." Nate said, "Beforehand?" I reckon he ought to. He probably don't believe in such anyway." "I believe he'll believe soon enough." Nate said, "Believe?" The old man reached out a bony hand, and Nate could have sworn the hand kept reaching, kept coming, long after it should have had to stop. He could have sworn he could see the bony fingers about to brush his face, though the old man still sat across the dark parlor. The old man said, "Before we go any further, before we can leave this place and keep our consciences clear, we need to tell you a story." "Oh, Foot, dear," the old woman said, "he needs to hear more than the one story." The old man clucked his tongue. "Well, but they're all the one or the other story, ain't they? How about you just get to telling and let him decide?" The old man stopped smiling. He put his bony hands on his knees. Nate wished he could stop looking at him like that. He tried to look away, to look at the old woman beside him, to look down at his glass of iced tea, but found that he couldn't. "Everybody tells some story of their own creation," the old man said. "Every one of them's at least a little lie. But God forgive those whose story's too much a lie, and God have mercy on those poor souls who forget entirely even the lies. Some such stories tell of battles fought or havens sought, some of magic treasures found or secret gardens discovered. Some tell of murders most foul, brother killing brother, or of con jobs or kidnaps or other crimes. What kind of a place, though, and what kind of a people living in it, start their story with the lost never found because of what the finding might mean? What kind of a place, I ask you, and what kind of a people?" Nate could feel his eyes begin to widen. The old man said, "Now listen. Thank y'all. Please give to Farm Cafe. Thank you for listening to 10 for 10.